Welcome, everybody. As you're just signing in, we're just going to take a minute to make sure everybody logs in and gets their sound on. But you are in the right place if you've come to hear about the 250th anniversary of Masi. Elisa, buongiorno. Sei sul panel, sarebbe meglio se potresti registrare come ospite. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Hi, everybody. This is Lars Leicht from the Psalm Journal. Welcome to our little discussion here with myself and Raffaele Boscaini, who is the seventh generation of his family at Masi, and just celebrated the 250th anniversary. 4 years older than when the United States was founded. That's pretty impressive. So welcome, Raffaele.
Hi everyone, and thanks for having me tonight. Today, this morning actually, it's night for me, but the day for you guys.
Exactly. Absolutely. For me, it's morning. I'm coming to you from California. So it's 9 a.m. here, and or what is it? Yeah, it's 9 a.m. here, and Raffaele is coming to us directly from Verona. So it's in the evening there, 6 p.m. We're thrilled to be here. So I had the great pleasure of visiting Raffaele very recently as his family held their official celebrations of the 250th harvest at Vaio Armaron, their property there. I'm going to give you a little bit of a proof of that. So this is little shot of myself. I got lucky. I was the lucky one to be able to sit next to Raffaele and hear his speech. I was paying attention even when I took this selfie. But you can see that we had I can get my screen. There it is. That was the tasting that we had, which was pretty impressive. We went through 11 vintages over 7 decades, starting with 1958. Not to make anybody jealous, but I think that the important thing is the longevity of this producer. So today we're going to be tasting as well. This was again a tasting as Raffaele's dad, Sandro Boscaini, was presenting to the esteemed panel this historic occasion. And today we're going to, some of us from the Psalm Guild, some of the fortunate ones out there. Whoops, I just messed up on that screen, but we're back. I'm not sharing screen anymore, so here we are. So today we're actually going to be tasting a couple of different wines with thanks to the Psalm Foundation. We have a bunch of lucky individuals got to taste some wines with us, so we're going to get to that in a minute. But Raffaele, give us a synopsis of the pressures on you as the 7th generation, and obviously the proud history of your family winery.
I mean, no pressure at all, I have to say. Actually, it's a great pleasure, and I would say I feel really fortunate to be part of this beautiful story, and to be part even to this beautiful industry, the wine industry. I always say to friends, to anybody, that is the best job you can have in the world. Since the wine world is fascinating because we give you a lot of chances to be in many different with different people, with different culture, and in different occasions. Anyhow, always we are everybody are equal in front of the bottle of wine, and with a nice always creates a nice atmosphere. But I'm saying this philosophical part, let's go for the history. As you correctly said, I'm representing the 7th generation of my family running Masi, and in fact it starts from this vineyard where my ancient first started to cultivate in 1772, and this vineyard was called Vaio dei Masi, which is means literally little valleys, Vaio, and from that name came, by the way, the name of the winery. As a surname, I'm Boscaini. The winery is called Masi. So we celebrate correctly 3 weeks ago the 250th vintage harvest from that Vaio dei Masi vineyard. We are, of course, located into the Valpolicella, in the northeast of Italy, in the just up north from Verona, which is our main city in the area, which is the located between Venice and the Dolomites, exactly in the middle, where starts, of course, the hill that a few 100 kilometers back becomes Dolomites. And from the Valpolicella going south, you go to Venice, so totally on flat land until the sea. This geographical idea to understand the condition where we grow the grape in that land. Grape that is related to three varieties, totally unknown to the most of the people, because are varieties that just grows in Italy, just grows in Verona, not just in Italy, in Verona, in Valpolicella. And we are talking about the three varieties, Corvina, Rondinella, and Molinara, the third. The three varieties, as you can imagine, are into a blend, plays a different role within the blend, and it is a nice combination to have a pleasant wine, and we need to have this combination to have a pleasant wine. Corvina, being normally in the blend of the Valpolicella's wine, between 60 to 90% in the blend, you imagine immediately that is the one that gives the core to the wine. The main flavor is the one from Corvina, and is recalls a lot the cherry flavor. Moreover, we have Rondinella, which is a grape with thicker skin and more dark, which more rich in tannins, giving then to the blend once again more structure. Normally, Rondinella is around 15 to 25% into the blend. The third variety, which is the weakest, and is not everybody are using it, is Molinara, which doesn't bring any color at all. It's almost pinkish. Even the grape, the bunch is almost pinkish, but provides a very interesting, acidity and nice, let's say, salinity to the wine that keeps the wine alive and fresh and refreshing. We were talking with you last a few minutes ago about the pleasantness of a very simple glass of Valpolicella. Is a joy of your mouth. It's no complexity, nice drinkability and freshness that really can accompany you in almost in every moment of your day. A glass of Valpolicella, right?
Exactly. I just commented on how great of a breakfast wine it is for me right now. As we continue speaking, why don't we invite those of you who have the wines in front of you? Why don't you join Raffaele and I in a glass of the Bonacosta, which is his Valpolicella. I'm going to indulge as well. But Raffaele, if you don't mind, I want to address a little bit about what you spoke about. And I just had put up the picture of the grapes that were starting drying for the appassimento, which we're not talking about here. And that's also very important because the appassimento is something that is crucial for the wines of Verona. It is their hallmark. It is pretty unique to Verona. Other people are doing appassimento, but my understanding is that Corvina, Rondinella, Ozzoletta lend themselves especially well to this process, more so than the international varieties. They develop differently, the still beans develop differently, and through some amazing process, the ancient Romans figured this out, and they've been doing the appassimento since. And they have their place, and we're going to taste them, and we're going to talk about them. But to me, this is what a Valpolicella should be, because it is fresh and clean. And as Raffaele said before, if a Valpolicella is going to be full-bodied and structured, then why have a Ripasso or an Amarone? And I also, Raffaele, would like to also discuss with you a little bit more in depth the fact that, as you mentioned, very few people are using Molinara, which I think is a shame, and I think it reflects a little bit the trend toward making fuller bodied wines, the desire to make fuller bodied wines, because my understanding is that one of the things that Molinara brings to the table is a freshness, a lightness to the wine.
Correct. Correct.
That really lightens it up. And that's key. That's pretty important. I know that they use it predominantly a lot in Bardolino. They use it more because they're lighter, fresher wines. But I love the fact that you guys are using it in Valpolicella. And I know that you also have some very special clones of it. So tell us a little bit about the origins of the Molinara that you use.
Yeah, in fact, Molinara, you correctly said, is the variety that brings to the wine freshness and drinkability at the end of the day. A nice, crisp acidity, and keeping the wine, as I said, very alive and vibrant, with a nice spicy touch that recalls a little bit the pepper, but just a little bit. You correctly said in Bardolino, in fact, they use a higher percentage of Molinara with actually even a Corvina, which is more light. And so the Bardolino has got this beautiful characteristic to be nice and crispy. Talking about the variety, the clone that we have of Molinara grapes, for the Serego Alighieri wine from the estate of the descendant of the poet Dante, we still have some 11 plants that are not grafted on rootstock, because they are one that survived to the Phylloxera. So plants that are around 140 years old, still in the garden of the family of the Serego Alighieri. From that branch, we took the sprouts to replicate the plants that we are normally have in our vineyard. So something very ancient and with a specific denomination, Serego Alighieri.
Which is wonderful. Now, not to put you on the spot, but I know that those of in our audience here who have been studying up and preparing themselves and have learned a little bit about Valpolicella and Amarone know that we are looking at those three grapes that you mentioned. But if those of you who study the textbook examples know that something is missing here compared to the norm, Raffaele, where is the Corvinone?
Corvinone, in fact, the Corvinone is mixed to the Corvina. It is a simplification that, as Masi normally does, we have Corvina and Corvinone, we name as the same and as Corvina. Nevertheless, it's true, it's correct what you are saying, is always a portion of Corvina and Corvinone. For us, it means around half and half, half Corvina and half Corvinone. They are very similar varieties, even if they are not exactly the same family, but very similar. And the, let's say, the elements that brings to the wine are pretty much the same.
Awesome. Do you, in this picture, can you see differences between the Corvina and the Corvinone in this particular selection? I think maybe the one to the left looks a little bit bigger.
Yeah, in fact, the one to the left, for sure, are Corvinone, and probably even one on the right, the one just beside the panel, is a Corvinone again. Yeah. But I mean, it's not easy from this picture. You should see it from live. I can tell you with 100% sure, but not here. Yeah.
Right. I know the basic differences has been explained to me, and again, it's in the name. So the suffix one in Italian means big. So Corvina,
yes.
crow. Corvinone, the big crow, because the grapes on Corvinone tend to be a little bit bigger. They're not the identical grape. There is some genetic connection, but they are separate grapes. But they give very, very similar characteristics, which makes sense for you to put them together. The other thing about looking at that picture is you could see, even though these are grapes, so I took this picture 2 weeks ago, and you can see they had recently been harvested. They haven't started to wither completely yet. But what you can notice is that they're very sparsely packed. And that's something that's very important for the grapes for Amarone, correct, Raffaele?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I don't know if it's correct. We say that the loose bunches, the one that with more space within within the berries, allowing the air to go through. In fact, and we are talking about appassimento now, when we are selecting the grape to be dried in the dry loft, we always say we choose the best bunches. It's not totally correct. We choose the bunches that are more suitable for the purpose. So the one that are more loose, because we can have a very compact bunch that is even better of the other, but is not good for the appassimento, so goes for the Bonacosta Valpolicella. So to be crushed immediately. So it's always better to check is the physical characteristic that make a difference rather than the ripeness or other elements that we can have. Yeah.
I've been told one of the things about especially the Corvina and also the Rondinella is when you take a bunch, if you can, the ideal is when you can take the bottom grape and almost bring it up to line up with the stem. They're that loosely packed.
Yeah, that means that you can do that. So there's no, it's like a man with a lot of muscles cannot even close his arm, right?
Right.
Because it's too, yeah.
No, it's key. It's key for when they're growing, keeps mold down, because Valpolicella area can be a little bit damp, and obviously key when you're doing the appassimento, so they're not rubbing up against
absolutely,
each other.
Absolutely. Correct.
So let's I want to go on about more about appassimento, but I want to wait. So let's just talk a little bit about the fresh Bonacosta Valpolicella. What do you see with this wine? I know what you enjoy it with every day. I know what I enjoy it with, but when we're speaking to people that are working in American U.S. restaurants or selling in U.S. retail stores, what is the place for Valpolicella? What kind of foods, what kind of occasions do you recommend?
I would say that, as you said before, now we are, everybody are quite oriented on the big structure and big body wines. Nevertheless, the joy of the wine can be expressed even easily. So if you have a nice chicken, for example, barbecued chicken, or pasta is probably the best pasta, or why not even going in a less formal way, why not with a pizza is perfect, a nice glass of Valpolicella while chewing a nice slice of margherita or a pepperoni pizza.
Lovely. That's perfect. Absolutely. I would even dare, I don't want to disparage the wine, but to call it a cocktail wine. It's a great fresh wine to have with, as soon as your company comes over, you're serving some hors d'oeuvres. And I think that in the summer, you can just slightly chill the wine as well. Just have it like cellar temperature, not necessarily refrigerator temperature, because of its freshness.
And the alcohol is 12, so it's not that much. Is you can drink a glass more. Absolutely.
Nice. I didn't know there were any red wines that were still under that were still at 12%.
under 14 or down there. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I have to say that a few months ago I was home bringing from the cellar a bottle of Bonacosta, and I put the roast chicken to warm up in the oven. By the time it was warm, the bottle was at the half.
Perfect. Yeah, it didn't last very long, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Very cool. So with that, let's talk about our next wine. Now, this is a very important wine for your family's lineup. It's actually a very important wine for Valpolicella, the whole region.
I would say yes, absolutely. Campofiorin is really the flagship for Masi. And if you ask me which is the wine that is like a son for Masi, definitely is Campofiorin. It is the historical wine for Masi, came in 1964, his first vintage, and this is really the wine that has been designed to with a precise role into the portfolio of the wines. At the time, there were the enology and the use of the wine. It was quite different than now. we were having my grandfather, for example, if you look at his production, he had some white wine from Soave, a red wine from Valpolicella or Bardolino, and a few bottles produced of Amarone. And that was all. So I always say that he had an everyday drinking wine, Valpolicella, as we said before. Then he had a wine for Easter and Christmas, like Amarone. And I always say he was in need of a wine for the Sundays. So basically creates a Campofiorin. So the ideal midway between the simplicity and drinkability of the Valpolicella we had a taste and the complexity and the majesty of Amarone. And so by, let's say, restudying and developing again a very ancient technique of washing the skin of the Amarone with some Valpolicella, came out this double fermentation or ripasso. So at the beginning was made exactly like that. After the fermentation of Amarone in February or March, at the end of the long appassimento, racking out the wine from the vat, they used to pour the Valpolicella produced just a few weeks before, a few months before, in October, with a fresh grape and so on. And in this way, the wine, this Valpolicella fresh, gets a second alcoholic fermentation, thanks to the residual sugar that were left into the barrel from the Amarone, from the recent fermentation of Amarone, having this second fermentation a little bit more alcohol, of course, more structure, and new, especially new interesting aromas that doesn't belong anymore from the Valpolicella, but they recall already the Amarone. So a clever and a very cheap way to have a much better wine instead of a Valpolicella. And this was really something quite innovative and definitely unusual for that time. Moreover, talking about the wine of that age, that time being in 64, was really probably even one of the very first premium wines that were quite democratic at the same time. So, as I said, you were the large bottle of 2 liters of simple Valpolicella everyday drinking wine, and then the Amarone, so a more an elite wine. But then there was some premium wines, like a Campofiorin, that the one that, okay, this weekend I can buy a bottle rather than to have the gallon or whatever. And it was really opening the door of what wine represents now. In terms of wine, better to taste, probably, to give a chance. It brings to your mouth the same sensation of Valpolicella in terms of being a friendly wine, gentle in the mouth, with quite an interesting live acidity.
Now to talk a little bit about I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. But in the mid palate become, quite more thick than Valpolicella. And even the length is much more interesting rather than Valpolicella. So something that is really more interesting, more robust, with some more muscles in comparison with Valpolicella, but always gentle and smooth.
Now, so this wine, historically in your family, this wine started off as the first ripasso, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Which was something essentially that your family, your father and your grandfather had been working at and developed, and it seemed like a great idea for all the reasons that you're discussing right now. And so they actually gave the name ripasso, the trademark, they gave it to the community, to Valpolicella, to the consortia to use for that style of wines. And then you guys actually got away from it. So this is not a ripasso, correct? It is distinct from a ripasso?
Yeah, in fact, it born like a ripasso, but already in the 80s, we switched the technique a little bit. So nowadays, since the 80s, Campofiorin is no more produced by using the pomace or the lees from the Amarone fermentation. Has been updated the technique. So now for making Campofiorin, we have, let's say, two harvests, I always say. Sorry, one harvest and two crushes. One of the 80% of the grape right away in October when we harvest, and the second, the crushing, comes in December with the other 20% of the grape that has been dried but not fermented. So we put now some fresh wine and dried grapes unfermented to do the second fermentation. In this way, we can have a, let's say, a better control of this second fermentation, because we know exactly what we have as ingredient. Doing the ripasso with the Amarone, first of all, we can have quite big headaches in vintages like 2014 when you don't produce Amarone. How can you make your ripasso, right? So either you are forced to produce Amarone, a bad Amarone maybe, or you don't produce it in the ripasso. And the second, because of course, when you have the lees of Amarone, you never know what is in that vat. Could be a lot of residual sugar, not at all. Some bitterness is too variable, and we want to have a wine that is always, of course, always following the variation of the vintages, but must be Campofiorin. We cannot risk to have a sort of Amarone, one particularly nice vintage, or just a little bit more Valpolicella. So we need consistency through the vintages.
Yep. Another one of my understandings is that if you to make a ripasso, you have to leave the pressings of the Amarone a little bit wet, which means in theory you could be taking away something from your Amarone. So it's always a little bit of a challenge. This eliminates that, and it eliminates the pressings of sort of, they've done their job. Oh God, do we have to do more? They get to take a break from that. So that's cool. And again, this wine shows that freshness, which is absolutely wonderful. It's obviously got slightly broader shoulders, but its tannins are sweet and in balance. Where would you go with this food pairing wise, especially considering the American US?
I always say that is the most eclectic wine that we produce. You really, Campofiorin, you never make mistakes in pairing with the food. You can go from simple, almost like a patio wine with some finger food as an aperitivo, up until all your barbecue, until even some mature cheese, considering even that this wine, guys, can be stored in your cellar for over 20 years and really improve in a beautiful, beautiful way. It's really even a long-lasting wine. In the other things that I was about to mention, that is fresh, is vibrant. At the same time, especially in the nose, you already notice a certain complexity in the nose, richness, much more. If you put together Valpolicella and Campofiorin, you feel they are brothers, but this one studied at the university. In a way, he has some more complex contents rather than the regular Valpolicella. So is a very interesting wine, and once again is really open to many pairings or occasions.
Absolutely. It's the kind of wine that I can see this now. You start moving up into, you can have roasts with this, you can have good old-fashioned American barbecue, anything like that. But at the same time, I would not hesitate to put this with any sort of a fish, a broiled fish, a roasted fish,
why not? Yeah,
especially one that has some tomatoes and herbs, a little Mediterranean flavor to it, because the tannic structure isn't strong. It's nice. It's still soft and round.
Yeah, or you take, for example, a nice salmon, which is fattiness and so on, is perfect with this. And I want to just underline another characteristic of Campofiorin. Is really an international icon. I always say that Campofiorin goes, this label, you for sure you saw it many times everywhere and so on. And it's like a very few others labels in the world that are really almost everywhere. This one, I would add from Italy, even Villantinori. I would add the Marques de Riscal, the Gran Coronas from Torres. Some other, there are these bottles that you find everywhere with the same reliability, the same price point, pretty much. And they are the wine that you never make a mistake if you choose that one from a shelf.
You're right. I mean, it's fully reliable. You have great distribution internationally, but at the same time, as you can see, as we're speaking with you, you have family control. So it makes it reliable. It makes it one of those favorite wines around the world. So congratulations on that. Now let's get to the moment we've all been waiting for and dive into the Costasera. Amarone, tell us a little bit about the Costasera, please.
Yeah. So we already talked about the appassimento and the technique how to make the appassimento. This bamboo trays where the three varieties lies down between 3 to 4 months. And what are the effects of this time? So first of all, you have a loss of weight. So means let's say water that evaporates from the berries and go in the atmosphere, and so the grapes get dried. Not as much as raisins. You can see they still are intact basically. But I always say to describe what is the berries after the appassimento, they are like the balloons 2 days after the party. They are not more. They are soft. They can touch and they are not responding. They are not turgid. So, and you have lost around 30 to 35% of weight, means humidity that went out. In this condition, what you have a concentration of what? Of all the elements, the tannins, the color compounds, the acidity, of course, the sugars, and of course get all concentrated. With this, let's say, thicker juice, we start a fermentation that take place in January, February. So at let's say natural cold fermentation, because I mean it's quite cold here in the middle of the winter, and this fermentation take place at this condition. So it's very slow fermentation. Moreover, during the appassimento, we have even a transformation of the aromas. If you know exactly what I'm talking about, if you have a fresh apricot on your counter or a dried apricot, it tastes different. You feel the same flavor as a base, but they taste different. And exactly the same here. That's why after this fermentation, we have totally new aromas and so on. Being a wine that can reach 15.5 degree in alcohol, and having this quite robust structure, is a wine that even needs quite a long aging in wood. And here comes, let's say, our style of aging in wood. We decided to keep using the traditional large barrel to age the Amarone, and together with a mix of smaller casks. We do not use barrique on the Amarone, since the characteristic of this wine is to be quite delicate. I say that it is strong, but it's delicate, it's gentle at the same time. So we not use any barrique. We want the effect of the wood aging. We don't want the flavor of the wood aging. I always say to the winemakers, please use the wood as a chef should use salt and pepper. They are never an ingredient. They are just to smooth the angles. You don't have to feel the salt. You have to feel the result of using the salt. So pulling out the flavors from the raw materials. And this is what we do with Amarone. In terms of sourcing of the grape, Costasera is a wine with the grapes coming from several vineyards in the Valpolicella Classica. But all this vineyard has got the same kind of position. So they are all vineyards that are looking to southwest. Means this is the meaning of Costasera. Costa means slope, Sera means evening. Southwest is evening for us, and is where the Lake Garda is located. And so these vineyards can enjoy of the influence of this the largest lake in Italy that provides more mild climate.
It gets the afternoon sun, which is
of course the afternoon sun, absolutely.
Yep. Warming and that's
so it's easily to when you taste the Amarone to understand that is of course quite an important wine, but never too big or too much never arrogant. Is a gentle giant.
Love that. Now, so you guys have been your first or one of your first vintages, which we tasted a couple of weeks ago, was 1958. And I remember that you did this, by the way, you're talking about the vineyards. We had the great occasion to go touring in the vineyards with your dad. And this is him obviously looking very proud, showing us the different vineyards, just breathtaking scenery out there in Valpolicella. And he gave us that full explanation, which is great. But so you guys have been producing it since the mid 1950s, and Amarone really did not exist before then. Give us a little bit of that background, that tale. What was going on before then? What was Amarone before?
So Amarone before was a name that was given to those wines that were not that were totally dry. So without any residual sugar. Could have been Valpolicella, either a real Amarone, because Amarone, as it is now, started in 64, in 68, when the Consorzio gave the first disciplinare, so the rules to make Amarone. Before was a sort of far west, let's say, was totally in the end of the producer, of the families, having this tradition of producing the Recioto, the sweet wine, or either his version dry called Amarone. So there was not a real recipe, but just a tradition from the families. What happens then in 68, the DOC system took a sort of picture of what was happening and say, okay, these are the rules. Then, of course, the things are evolved, and Masi, I have to say, that has been very instrumental in making evolution of Amarone, giving a lot of innovation, starting from the vineyards, where the goal in the vineyard is to have, of course, the quality of the bunches, but even the more loose bunches, thanks to system of pruning, what is the training of the vines, all the things that you can do in the vineyards. Then has been done a lot of innovation in the cellar, starting from to remove all the stalk, for example, which is not that obvious. Having dried grape, the stalk, the stem become very fragile after dried, and so everything into the vat. And it's not good things, because they put the bitterness or some undesirable flavors. For example, at Masi, in the 80s, we purchased a large stemmer, much larger than the need that we had, going very slow. So you can having the pieces of wood detached correctly from the berry. Moreover, into the fermentation time. As I said, it can be a very long fermentation for the Amarone, which is nothing wrong ideally, but when you have a long fermentation, can really happens a lot of oxidation at the same time. So when you have a wine a little bit oxidized or with the bad smells of this difficult fermentation that comes and then stops and so on, what you do? Long time in aging in barrel. That's why if we are going back in the 80s, let's say in 1990, you drink an Amarone from 81 because it was never ready. You need to get rid of these things. So in the vintage 85, we introduced a cultured yeast that was called the Saccharomyces baianus, same yeast that they use for the bread, that has the characteristic to perform very well a fermentation, even in this, let's say, extreme condition for a yeast. Means low temperature, a lot of sugar to be converted in alcohol, and a lot of alcohol. Normally, a yeast, when it's around 13, start to be stressed, right?
Yeah.
And so, Saccharomyces baianus, first of all, is what I call a yeast that is a killer. First of all, kills all the other bacteria and yeast, and then do the job. So
yeast, I like that.
after this fermentation, that's still long because the job to be done is long, but is regular, never stops, never collapse the temperature and so on. So it's regular until the end, and you have the result of having a beautiful wine, totally fermented, and that you can drink it even relatively young after the fermentation. That's why now Amarone with 4 years in barrel is ready to go into market, and you can drink it now. Once it's on the shelf, you can buy and open it. This is the modern style Amarone. What else? Before you ask me, pairings.
You know where I'm coming from.
Yeah. Pairings again is a wine that has got some structure. So I cannot say that you can have it with a nice mozzarella. You need something at least to counterbalance the weight. But when you have something with the enough flavor, is okay. You are not in a need of something else, because if you taste it on its own, you feel that everything is already around. You have a nice tannin structure, but totally well balanced by the acidity. You have the fruitiness, you have everything, but you are not having, for example, an excess of tannins, and so you need something fatty in terms of food. It's already smooth and gentle. So once you have something with a good weight in the mouth, you're okay. So in practically speaking, to me, the best pairing of Amarone is a nice chunk of Parmesan, a drop of honey and some walnut, you are in heaven. But of course, you can enjoy it with a beautiful barbecue of nice red meat, or the more traditional roast meat and so on, maybe cooked even into the Amarone itself.
I have to tell you, so this wine, if you guys, those of you who have it, for those of you who know, and those of you who don't, this wine is at 15% alcohol. That's not that high for an Amarone, considering everything has gone through. And the wine itself is not super extracted. Everything is in beautiful balance. Even the color is not super inky, which sometimes can happen with Amarones. And a lot of Amarones become beautiful wines to have just with cheese, nuts, that sort of thing. But this is very much a food wine. And I suspect there's a little bit of that play of the Molinara coming into here. The wine is super elegant, and I'm sitting here. We're going on 9:45, and I hope my hosts Jim and Carol have a good breakfast plan, because this wine is making my mouth water. It's beautiful, balanced, dry wine, and shows off some great, even a little bit of salinity, minerality to it. It's really and great. What's the word I'm looking for? Sapidity. Very savory wine. So it's a 2017 vintage, and as to your point, it's ready. I'm enjoying it very much right now, but I can also see how it can take some age. And it'll take that age well because it's got that backbone of good acidity that'll hold it up. So fantastic. So thank you for that. So transitioning and speaking about Amarones in general, and then going into some products, some of the beautiful wines that you have that I don't have here today. We couldn't send all of them out. But a lot of people think about Amarone the way they would think about, for example, Champagne. Many people are of the belief that Amarone, like Champagne, are strictly technique. And I know that the people in Champagne will argue with that. I know we just had a recent seminar with Louis Rodra, and we got into the fact of how terroir can be reflected in Champagne. And now, so talk to me a little bit more about how can terroir be impacted, can impact Amarone, because you've got a growing season, and yes, you've got definitive soils, but then you have that second season that Amarone faces.
That's the point, yeah, in fact.
90 to 100 days, and I want to talk about time too. 90 to 100 days of appassimento. Does that wipe out anything that the terroir brought to the table?
Definitely not, because the terroir means even the climate condition in this time. So when you are having, for example, I always say is a very wet autumn that, thanks God, we don't have this year. You have the grapes that are not drying and maybe having some mold. Of course, then you have the expression of the soil as any other wine on earth. So look at the difference of just the two pictures that you show us. They represent a very big difference in the soil, and this is something that goes into the grape and therefore into the wine. But coming back on the climate condition, I always give this example. We have two different crus of Amarone out of the Costasera we're tasting now. We have Campolongo and Mazzano. You visited both the vineyards 3 weeks ago, and you saw that are really two vineyards that are very close one to each other. It's around half a mile from Mazzano to Campolongo. In looking at there, they are pretty much the same altitude. They are two different worlds, totally. In Campolongo, we have a volcanic origin soil, very black earth, bringing a lot of minerals. And in Mazzano, we have more clay and some stones into the soil. Moreover, the condition where the appassimento comes in Campolongo is a slope, once again facing southwest, which is protected by the slope itself from the wind come from the north. Whence instead, Mazzano is totally exposed to the wind that hit the little house in the middle of the vineyard, and there is always hit by some wind. In this, for example, in these conditions in Mazzano, you have no risk of mold, of course, but not even you don't have the botrytis, and botrytis is something that is really very important for the Amarone, for this characteristic of smoothness. It happens that the Corvina grape normally gets infected by the end of the drying season by botrytis, and botrytis generates glycerin into the berries, and the glycerin is the responsible of this smoothness. So you understand that in some place in a terroir where the botrytis doesn't come, you have a different wine. And Mazzano, for example, if you have the chance ever to taste, is the one with less glycerin and less smoothness. Is the one that is more austere, more severe. And this is really the demonstration of the possibility to perceive the terroir even into the Amarone.
It's true. It's an amazing study. So if you have the chance to try those two wines, I highly recommend it. It's a great demonstration. And again, we did they were very kind in last month to do a tasting of the 3 different vineyards side by side, and showing doing a vertical, and you could definitely see how the styles through the years, there's a little obviously vintage variation, but most definitely a terroir influence of the wines consistently. So I want to talk a little bit about aging, but Raffaele, we have a question from my dear friend Giovanni Fodera asking about the 2017 vintage in particular. It was a hot vintage. Now, I know we just talked about there are 2 seasons of Amarone, and the season during the Passimento can make a big difference too. But when you have such a hot, dry summer as you had in 17, how does that impact your strategies when you're coming into the Frutale?
We have already the experience of 2003 vintage that was even hotter than 2017. And I have to say that what happens was at the time to have a little bit earlier harvest, but not that earliest, not that much. And of course, then you, as always, we are in the hand of God. We cannot do many things. Nevertheless, it has been quite checked the ripeness of the grape without exceeding in too much sugar level. So that's why a few days before the normal, and this was okay. Then it's correct that the characteristic of the grape is not the same as a vintage and so on. And in fact, if we are approaching 2003 now, after nearly 20 years, you find a wine that is a little bit more developed than the average. But there's nothing wrong with that. Since Amarone can last for 30 to 35 years easily, you tasted the 58, so is nearly 60 years. It is not of course is a vintage variation. So far is okay. Nowadays, I tell you more, we have a different situation. Since this warm climate vintages are coming more often since 2003 and now, we adopt some more precautions into the vineyards. For example, in the hillside area, we put a pergola training system in order to have a shadow on the berries themselves, right, and avoid the burning. Yeah, the head. Then there are some other rootstock developed to be more resistant to the heat, and many other small details. So, of course, a warm climate season can affect the wine, but there are even more technologies and knowledge to deal with them and to handle it as almost a normality.
The whole thing always is about achieving balance, right?
Correct. Yeah. Then, of course, we have to follow the vintage variation, so we cannot be totally flat and that's it. And what reflect the glass.
So my last question talks a little bit about variation, but before I pose that question to you, we're getting near the end of our wonderful hour together, and I would like to invite anybody, if you've heard what Raffaele has had to say, if you have any questions pertinent to the wines or the winery, please throw them up in the chats in the Q&A. We'll be happy to address them in the few minutes that we have left. But my last question for you, Raffaele, is to talk a little bit about the Appassimento time, right? That's something that I learned from your father and Andrea Dalcin. That's something very, very important to you, because the rules have changed and they've reduced the mandatory time, minimum mandatory time for Appassimento. I know you guys have very strong feelings about that. So tell me a little bit about what Appassimento really truly means to Amarone and what your family philosophy is on that.
Yeah. It's not just a question of philosophy, it's a question even of science. So I feel, and I can be really, really hard on that, that sometimes the rules of doing like to shorten the time of the Appassimento are made more for the producer rather than the product. So producer, of course, less risk and do, but it doesn't work like that. When I say in science, we prove with the University of Verona and the University of Bordeaux together, working together, they prove about the genetic activity that happens into the berries while they are drying. So the Corvina in particular, which is one of the most rich in genetic activities after picking, develops new aromas and new other characteristics 40 days. They start to work 40 days after picking. So you can imagine if you do the crush of that grape before this time, you are losing 30% of the new flavors, of the new aromas that characterize the Amarone. So in that way, you do just a concentration of Valpolicella, which is actually, I mean, I don't need to dry the grapes, just remove from water from the wine and I am done, right? So Amarone is not just a concentrated Valpolicella, is you can tell by tasting, it's totally another story. So is evolution, and evolution takes time. There's no story, there's no shortcuts.
There's a German saying, and I won't make you suffer through my terrible German pronunciation, but there's a German saying that says, people can either do it or you can do it right. You can do it correctly. And that's the same thing. The appassimento process, to your point, has a reason, has a motive, has a science behind it, and you need to let it run its course to a certain extent. So no shortcuts, quality.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Very cool.
Good.
So I don't see any questions coming up. We're nearing our hour, and I just want to thank you very much, Raffaele, and I want to send warmest regards to your dad too. So I'm gonna do a little brag here and give you a sneak preview that in the the December Psalm Journal. I can't find it on my share screen. I don't know where it went, but hold on. Show all windows. We have, all right, I don't have it, but I have the debut of my column in the Psalm Journal called The Light Side. Aha, the pun, get it? Where we talk about that anniversary visit and some detail, what I experienced during that tasting, which was amazing. And again, the lucky handful of people that were able to taste with us today, fortunate. Thank you to the Psalm Foundation for making that possible. It was wonderful. And thank you to my colleagues and the Psalm Journal, and of course, our publisher and editor-in-chief, Meredith May, for allowing us to continue these great educational webinars. And we just came off of SONCOM with some great seminars. So I've always loved the educational information coming out from the Psalm Journal. And Raffaele, thank you for your input. I learned a lot today, right? And I've got the VEP from Valpolicella, and I've been to your estates, but you never stop learning. And that's what events like this are all about. In closing, Mr. Seventh Generation, I got to say, it was also fun to see on stage during the ceremonies. You had the 8th and 9th generation, which is a really good sign. You've already got some 8th generation in there, 9th is coming up. So that's pretty good. You know, in the US business world, we often talk about it takes one generation to build it, second generation to run it, and the third to run it into the ground. You guys are coming up on 9, and that's pretty impressive. So you've obviously surpassed that and are doing the right thing. And I know you also have some balances in there. You have, for example, the Gruppo Tecnico. So it's not just the dictatorship. You have teamwork going on. You have some shares out there. So that's brilliant from a family point of view to make sure that it's not just, pardon the term, but it's not just incestuous. You have some outside input, and that assures you that. I'll show you one more slide before we close off. So we were, bear with me while I scroll through these, but this left an impression upon me. This is in your cellars. This was from the 200th anniversary 50 years ago. And your father talked about being there as a young man with his father. And I think that bodes extremely well. And I think that I can't wait. I don't know if I'm going to be around for your 300th anniversary, but there's certainly going to be one. And undoubtedly it's going to be a great party and even better vertical tasting. So Raffaele, thank you very much. I leave it to you. Any last words you have to share with our our audience?
Absolutely. Lovely. So just thanking you for being here and give me the stage tonight. You know, as how much I love to share with the wine lovers, but with everybody, my wines and our history. And so it was really a very good time for me. And what else to say? Salute.
Salute, your passion is contagious. Thank you. On behalf of the Somm Journal, thank you all very much. And remember to check out my column in the December issue of Somm Journal. And if you don't have a subscription to the Somm Journal, complimentary for the trade, I sound like an infomercial now, but I highly recommend you get it. And send me, if you don't have it already, send me an email at lars@sommjournal.com and we'd be happy to set you up. So again, thank you from the Somm Journal, Somm Foundation. Cheers and buonasera to you, Raffaele. Buon giornata to me and buon pomeriggio to my friends on the East Coast. Thank you all.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Ciao, ciao, ciao. Bye, bye.